2026 Belgian Grand Prix Race Notes. Dick's Race Notes.
Well, hey everybody, and welcome back to Two Guys, a Girl in F1. Sabrina, Joe, and I recorded our conversation about the Belgian Grand Prix earlier today, but I wanted to just throw in some of my unfiltered thoughts about the race and share them with you, just because I'm not sure that I necessarily had full time really to just kind of gather my thoughts and see exactly what I felt like were some highlights about the race. We had a very good discussion, but I've been noodling on it ever since, and I just feel like there's a few things that I now want to say. So here's my attempt at it. And so first of all, the race between Kimi Antonelli and Charles Leclerc at the end of the race, Charles had inherited the lead by dint of a perfectly timed virtual safety car for Charles, not so perfectly timed for Kimi. And it was very interesting because I saw that and I saw how Kimi was closing down the gap once the track went green again. And while the announcers were kind of hyping it up, I was sort of like, yeah, this race is going to be no contest unless something happens to Kimi's car. Kimi's going to win this race. And really, I had been thinking that all weekend long. He looked so strong in practice, both on his race pace and his single lap qualifying pace. I was just like, unless he hits some sort of mechanical misfortune or he trips up over a back marker, I just don't see Kimi losing this race. And it really kind of played out to be that way. He drove a very good race, was very dominating, and was certainly a very well-deserved victor of this race, in my opinion. Now, on the other hand, his teammate, George Russell, had another miserable race. It seems like that George's car gets hit with the cartoon anvil. And what I call the cartoon anvil, it's like watching a Looney Tunes cartoon where all of a sudden, Wile E. Coyote is running down the road after the Roadrunner and an anvil falls out of the sky just all of a sudden. No one knows where it came from and flattens him. And that's what's happening to George. Yes, Kimi's gotten it once or twice, but it seems like there's new ways that the cartoon anvil drops on George. And, sometimes drivers make their own luck, but what happened to him in Belgium, I mean, there was nothing he could do about it. There was an electrical glitch of some sort. He suddenly lost a whole bunch of power at a spot where he wasn't expecting to lose power. And I think it caught out Lewis Hamilton as well. And boom, off into the gravel trap, beached in the gravel, couldn't get out. And that was the end of George's race. So now the gap is back to something like 50 points, I think, between Kimi and George. So they're back basically where they were a few races ago. And of course, the difference now is there's fewer races for George to claw that difference back. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that while the curtain is not shut on George's aspirations for a world championship in 2026, man, oh man, with the kind of bad luck that he's having, I just don't know that he's going to be able to pull this one off. And Kimi seems to have the measure of him anyway. So I don't know. We'll see. Also want to have a big shout out to Isack Hadjar. He started on pit lane for an illegal engine change and came through to finish, on merit. He finished, I believe, 7th, may have been 6th after some penalties. But the bottom line is that he's got probably the 3rd or 4th best car. And so he lived up to the car's promise. No question about that. But the other part was he started way behind the field because of the penalty of starting from pit lane. And so he still had to drive well. His team still had to execute well. And they had to call good strategy, which they did. And so Isack came through and picked up some valuable points for the team in the Constructors' Championship. So, I thought it was a very nice, tidy drive by that young man. And, of course, starting from pit lane was no fault of his own. It was just that the engine needed to be replaced. So I also thought that Racing Bulls did a great job. They've been what I would consider to be a quiet surprise. They have consistently been at the top or near the top of the midfield throughout the year now. And, and every weekend it's either, Liam Lawson or Arvid Limbad who's performing really well, but the other driver is there or thereabouts as well. So really felt like they did a very good job there. And then last but not least, a lot is being made of, the B-spec car that is being rolled out by Aston Martin next weekend in Hungary. And of course, Williams has a car that will be coming out sometime after the summer break. And I wanted to talk a little bit about weight because both cars showed up at the beginning of the season seriously overweight. And that does all sorts of things. Extra weight makes the car harder to accelerate, makes the car harder to slow down. The extra weight makes it tougher on the tires. And the other part is that most of these teams want to have a car that is significantly underweight so that then when it comes time to go to a particular track, they put the ballast in to the car and bring it up to the minimum weight so that they know that they can actually adjust the handling characteristics a little bit just by, very cleverly placing the weight in places where the car needs it for a particular circuit. And so this is another huge disadvantage to Aston Martin and Williams. And I don't know if either of those cars are going to be significantly underweight where they have to be ballasted up, or if they're just going to be at the minimum weight. So it'll be really interesting to see what that translates to be. But in the case of Aston Martin, I've read that they have enough weight on the car that if they take it all off, they instantly will gain a second a lap. So, to put that in perspective, if they have an aero gain of about a second, which is probably about right, they're going to gain 2 seconds, which is going to put them about 12th or 14th in the race. In other words, challenging Williams. But if Williams then gains a second or maybe even a little bit more than a second a lap, once again, Aston Martin is losing touch with Williams as Williams goes further up the midfield. And I would expect that, a gain of a second or 1.2 seconds for Williams probably puts them in a position where they're challenging Toro Rosso or Racing Bulls. I want to call them Toro Rosso today for some reason. But anyway, that's their old name. Anyway, I think it's going to be fascinating. I don't have super high expectations for the Aston Martin B-spec car. I think it's going to take them several races to figure out, okay, what worked in real life versus what worked in the wind tunnel, what worked in CFD, what worked in the simulator. And then they're going to have to tweak it from there. But that plus a more powerful engine from Honda, word I have is that everybody's estimating the Honda's down about 100 horsepower, and the new version that will show up at Zandvoort will be worth about 60. So they're clawing some back, but certainly they're still on the back foot. And so I think right now showing progress is about the best that we can hope for from Aston Martin. So anyway, those are my race notes. Hope you enjoyed these. Hope that it brought you a little bit more insight into what's going on, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for listening.